In 2008, I met this amazingly awesome girl in school. Let's call her CR. I was 21 and she was just about to turn 19. We both knew what love was for the first time in our lives. We were both going to a community college, me for theater design and her for education. We lived about half an hour apart, but that was nothing more than a minor inconvenience because we spent every free moment between classes together. Come to think of it, that slight distance was actually pretty nice because being home at least forced us to focus on homework and taking care of ourselves and visiting each other at home. Was that much more special? CR graduated with her associates in 2009 and moved away to a state school to finish up her degree in early childhood special education like before. The distance was not a concern because it was just a short train ride away and I'd spend 1 or 2 weekends a month down there with her. I proposed to her on Valentine's Day 2010. School really wasn't my thing, and I ended up enlisting in the United States Air Force that following May and got moved halfway across the country to a place neither of us had ever imagined visiting. However, like before, we wouldn't let distance get in our way. Now, it should be noted that her mom did not like me. I still don't know why, but she was always the loudest, rudest, most annoying and disrespectful, mean lady I've ever met. She was from the city and she married into a family of farmers that owned the land since the 1870s. So that may explain part of her malice. From here on, I will call her Eb for evil. You get the picture. Another thing to know is that I have a great memory and this will be important later on in the story. Anyway, back to the military. I had a 2-week break between my training and leaving for my first and only duty station, which just happened to be over Christmas and New Year's. Even though we were engaged, we hadn't really put any consideration into actually getting married. She wanted something small with her family and cousins, and I was completely okay with going to a courthouse and getting it over with. I don't want to sound like I was trying to pressure her into that, but the way I saw it, I would be living in barracks in a few weeks and being married would get me a full monthly housing allowance, which I would save to have a wedding ceremony when we had time in another year or two. Basically get married now. Don't tell anyone because they would all get the hell upset for not being involved and have a fake wedding ceremony that would include both of our families and friends. It turns out that because I was living in barracks, I wasn't allowed to collect the housing allowance. And when 6 months later they realized I was actually married, kicked me out. It made me get a house on base. Either way, we didn't get married when I was home on leave and took an Amtrak train out west. I highly recommend traveling across country by train if you have the time. The first time we were able to see each other after that was during her spring break, which was the first part of March. SR, and I finally eloped in a courthouse and spent the next few days glued to each other. P&V style, like every young married couple should. I flew back home for a couple of weeks in June and this is when things started to unravel. Easter Seals, for those who don't know, run summer camps for special needs kids. And my new wife volunteered to be a counselor for the last 7 weeks of the summer. The last time I saw her that summer was just after her June birthday when I dropped her off at camp. The rest of the summer was hit or miss getting in touch with her since she was on the clock 24 hours a day for 5 days a week. And I completely understood her commitment to those kids when she was back in school. The following fall, she became increasingly distant, making excuses about how her phone would be randomly dead at oddly predictable times. Every week she flew out to spend Christmas with me in our new house, technically a crappy, mostly empty duplex, and things felt amazing like they had been. After that, however, she went back to being super reclusive like she was the previous semester. Fast forward to May 2012. It took a whole month of leave to fly home for her graduation and to help her move in with me. I barely recognize her. Every bit of communication with me was forced and so phony that I should have known what was really happening all along. She had set up what she called mock interviews with a couple of great schools near her hometown, and I actually believed that she was doing it just to get experience interviewing. What an idiot. When I finally started to catch on how serious she was about getting a job in our home state, she broke down crying and made it seem like I was forcing her to choose between me and her career. And of course, I wanted to put our marriage before anything else. Obviously, I returned to base without her. A couple of weeks later, I pressured her into telling me what the hell was going on. She fell in love with one of her fellow camp counselors and let the affair go on for about 9 months with claims that she was going to tell me but didn't know when. The usual too guilty to tie her own shoes BS. And she honestly expected me to walk away from my relationship right then and there. No. I fought tooth and nail to hold us together for 2 months before filing the divorce. I'm skipping a bunch of sappy details here, but the divorce was filed late August and became final that December, mandatory 90-day waiting period in my state. The pain I suffered in that one-sided relationship is something I would never wish on anybody unless they truly deserved it. Apparently, Eb whispered all kinds of lies or about how I joined the military to get away from her and actually had the gall to blame me for all the crying and misery her oldest child was going through. My soon-to-be ex never admitted who was blaming me for everything, but I was really close to her dad and siblings, so I can't imagine that they would ever suspect me. But she was so manipulative that by Halloween they had all turned against me, and at that point I had it. I was near suicidal and my anxiety attacks were heating basically every day. I was miserable, tired of being lied to, tired of the slander, tired of being the bad guy when I was the one who was attacked here. It started with sending texts to her brothers and sisters saying, "Hey, I'm actually your brother-in-law. Nice to know that we don't keep secrets, right?" SR exploded, but that was just the beginning. I wrote a 3,000-word letter explaining in every detail I could recall exactly what happened, the fact that we were married, including copies of the marriage license and certificate, our plans for the future, and how I was the only one living up to her expectations where she met the guy she was cheating with, his name, address, phone number, camp counselor name. So SR would have a harder time refuting it, and a bunch of other information that she made me keep secret for now. I sent copies to everyone of her extended family. Well, everyone. I had an address for her roommates this summer camp she worked at, close professors she had brought up in old conversations, and the principal of the school she ended up working at. Calling the fallout catastrophic is an understatement. Her super devout Catholic family basically disowned her. Her reputation, her former school was shattered, and the tension at her new job was apparently high enough that SR was forced to resign from her position before Christmas break. Started getting those secrets off my chest was the most cathartic moment of my life. Wow, good for you, OP. Hopefully that helped you put your life back together and keep on truckin'. In our next story, ex-husband gets what he deserves after he cheats on my sister. For some clarifications, this story takes place in a third world country in Asia. Laws are different here from the first world in Western countries. This took place in the Philippines. Our country is a conservative and Catholic country, so marriage and married life is held sacred. And any idea of divorce or separation of spouses is frowned upon by most traditionalists. We are basically the island version of Texas and Alabama, where there's lots of hardcore Bible thumpers. This story happened a few years ago when I was about to go to college. My cousin and her husband had been married for a year or so by then, but haven't had much success in conceiving a child. We live in a Southeast Asian country and surrogacy isn't legal for some reason, so that option was not in the cards for them. They talked about adopting, but both of them really wanted a child of their own. Anyway, after a few months more of trying, they decided to just postpone it for a while. Considering they are still young, as both are in their early 30s, contrary to popular belief, women can still get pregnant at 30 until 39. 40 is the high-risk slim chance age. They instead decided to focus on their respective careers and travel whenever possible. All in all, they were having a great life. On the outside, that is about a few months later. My sister noticed a few things. Nothing too drastic, like her husband would receive these late-night calls. Husband is a doctor and he would go to the other room to take it. Her husband always clearing the history in their shared desktop computer at home and having to go overtime way too often. Sister asked me and some of her cousins on what to do. At the time, I was dating a guy pretty tech-savvy who on multiple occasions hacked my Facebook. But that is for another story. So I asked him for help. Within 2 days, we had his Facebook, Gmail, and Instagram account. We found nothing. I thought, okay, weird. Maybe sis is being paranoid. Then I had a thought. What about his Viber? After a bit more digging, we were able to get a hold of his Viber. And boy, did we find things. This a-hole had been cheating on her for almost half a year. We found dozens and dozens of messages between him and some girl in one of the messages. The girl even admits that even though he is married, she loves him and likes the thrill of being with a married man. It made me and my boyfriend insane. The girl was just a few years older than me in her early 20s. They're even exchanging nudes with each other and talking about their little hookup. I was absolutely heartbroken. My older sister always wanted a family of her own, and this scumbag whom she thought was the love of her life had just did this to her. I told my boyfriend to save all of it in a hard drive and log out of the accounts. I was hesitant at first to tell my sister, but I knew she deserved the truth. A few days after debating it with myself, I finally showed her everything. As expected, this broke her. She cried and cried. I was crying along with her as I didn't really like seeing her like this. After hours of us both sobbing, I decided to get her to get revenge. My sister was never the vindictive type. She was often the timid girl who let people get away with everything because she didn't like confrontation. She was heavily bullied for this during her school years, according to her other cousins that were her age. Now, for the revenge, I told my sister of the plan. Now, she wasn't really planning on revenge. She wanted to just file for an annulment. Divorce isn't legal here, too, but I knew someone had to teach that jerk not to mess with her family. I told her to pretend everything was okay and that she was oblivious to his cheating. It took a good amount of coaxing, but she finally agreed. I decided we needed to catch them in the act because despite the overwhelming evidence, I had a hunch they would deny it. A week later, my sister called me and told me that her husband messaged her from his work. He told her that he might work overtime again at the hospital and would just be sleeping at their condo. That was about 10 minutes away. She said, "Sure," and called me almost immediately. I smiled and told my sister to meet me at the restaurant across the condominium where her husband would be. I arrived there alone and waited for my sister. A few minutes later, she arrived. Lucky for us, their condo unit was outfitted with CCTV cameras you can view on your phone, tablet, computer. Husband was not fully aware of this. Since when they got the condo? It was my sister who took care of outfitting the unit with furniture and stuff. He only signed the paperwork with her at the beginning and rarely had a hand in it. It was supposed to be a rental unit, but husband convinced my sister to let him use it when he would need overtime at work so he can just sleep there and not have to drive the 1-hour journey he had to take to get to their house. We viewed the footage as we were sitting down having some drinks. Nothing yet. Husband wasn't there. An hour passed and we see the front door open and in walks husband with his mistress. At that moment, my sister was about to cry, but I told her that he wasn't worth crap. And it's time to confront them. We went to the unit and sneaked inside using my scissors key. They were in the bedroom, still getting it on, and I slammed the door open to see them doing it. Horrible mental picture to say that these bastards were shocked.